Tip number 3 is don't let fear drive your next steps. And who wanted to tackle that initially? Don't let fear drive your next steps.
I'll start.
Okay.
So this one is super, super important. Okay. And we're saving it for last, but we really want to emphasize it's so important because essentially we don't want any clients letting fear drive decision making. And yet we recognize that clients at this stage are likely to be incredibly fearful. Perhaps they're insecure, they're feeling overwhelmed, their emotions are kind of ruling the brain, if you will. And sometimes I think people feel I've got to sort of fight that good fight to be able to sort of get through this really challenging time. And not all people approach it that way, but I think sometimes fear it brings out maybe perhaps not the best of us. And our default is a little bit more like, let me fight to get through it. And it's ironically the opposite. It's not about fighting the good fight or letting fear make those decisions for you. It's the opposite in that durable outcomes come from a place of where those emotions are sort of heard and settled. Because if you can really have true, authentic, transparent conversations, you can get so much farther in your decision making and in a way that helps build those skills that the clients can use post divorce. And so we're always sort of looking for that peaceful 2-home family post divorce scenario, both financially for the family, legally for the family, emotionally for the family. And by keeping those emotions balanced is our best opportunity to kind of achieve that goal. So when you're working with collaboratively trained professionals, I don't want to toot our own horn, but I'm gonna, because we really are good listeners. So we're active listeners, we're motivated to problem solve, and we're always going to be listening and giving fear its place to talk it through, but not letting fear run the show. And so, sometimes I think, when I've worked with clients, when they're saying, and I'm saying, okay, guys, it's really time to bring the collaborative lawyers in. I'm not a lawyer. We're not crafting an agreement. I'm just helping set the stage to begin the process. And I'll get this kickback like, oh, no, don't bring the lawyers. Whoa, don't do that. I'm not ready yet. And I really say, no, collaboratively trained lawyers, mediators, these are problem solvers. Lawyers want to help solve problems. They're not interested in stirring up conflict here. We're all trained to listen, to pay attention, to mine for those interests, to get that solution. And I would say all of us are dedicated to being part of the solution, not part of the problem. And then when the collaborative lawyers do enter the case, I turn back to the clients and say, see, I told you. And they're just so pleased. They're mining the same kind of result.
It's interesting that you said that, about people saying, oh no, don't bring in the lawyers. Because I think that probably comes from this just cultural expectation that people have about how divorce is supposed to go. There have been the movies like the War of the Roses, I think it was called, and there's always some big Hollywood nasty divorce, in the media and things like that, and I just wonder if a lot of that is behind some of that fear that you were talking about.
Oh, I think absolutely. I mean, I'm sure Karen and I could tell you stories about, how it can be in the other processes. I mean, it's maybe not as dramatic as something like the War of the Roses, but to the parties, it does feel that way. Yeah. And cases I've seen go horribly wrong because of that. And one of the beautiful things about collaborative process is we can be creative as attorneys. We can really think outside of the box. Where in other processes we may be limited to, options A, B, or C, where in collaborative we can come up with, D through F or even Z. We can come up with so many options, so many different ways to come to a resolution, and we can tailor it to what works for the parties.
Right. And being that it's a non-threatening environment, and we have sitting at the table the divorcing couple, the collaboratively trained attorneys, and the neutral professionals when needed, a lot of brainstorming can go on. There is a lot of creativity. Okay, if, as Shireen talked before about interests, if one of the parties has a specific interest, and we can all sit at the table and try to figure out, okay, how can we make this happen? Everybody's trying to work together, and it's certainly a very productive environment, and it's something that you don't often see in the litigation process. And I think overall, it's, at the end of the day, I think it's a much healthier way for couples to divorce, and it's a lot better for their families as well.
It sounds like you're talking about each spouse has their own attorney. You're talking about other professionals involved, like divorce coaches and financial professionals. It sounds like it's going to be more expensive than a traditional divorce. Is that true?
Well, I mean, that's a common misconception, is that it is more expensive because you have so many more people at the table. But the reality is, because it's the couple's divorce and the couples are actually doing a lot of the work themselves, it can be less expensive than the typical litigated divorce. And that's one of the nice things about it. It works, like Karen was saying, more efficiently often. So because we're more efficient and we're getting things done in a way that, again, the clients are maybe doing a lot of the homework. Maybe the clients are doing a lot of the budgeting without the attorneys being present. So when we have that discussion, they've done most of the legwork already. One of the other nice things is, with the issues like child custody and parenting time, the parties can go and just meet with the coach, or they can meet with a child specialist to work out and resolve those differences. So it actually can cost them less because they're only paying to meet with one neutral professional instead of having the entire team at the table.
And I think that what you just said about that professional being neutral sounds like that is a really important part of the equation, because that's why they can have one professional. They're just paying one professional, whereas in traditional divorce, they sometimes use experts, but isn't it typical for each party to have their own expert, and then they just try to each one tries to defend their own position and instead of working together?
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen litigation cases where husband will have his own custody expert, wife will have her own custody expert. Because there's a difference of opinions in two experts, then the court appoints a third expert. And so you're paying three people, $5,000 or $10,000 a piece to make an evaluation. Well, that gets expensive very quickly.
And the bottom line is, who the experts are on that? Mom and dad.
And that's a really good point, because, in the traditional divorce, it sounds like ultimately the decision is going to be made by a judge, right? And there's just no way that they can. I just can't see how the judge can honestly know what's best for the family going forward.
Well, now, a judge in a litigated divorce has limited resources as to how to make a decision. It's really, they've only seen the clients for a very small period of time in their courtroom. They don't know the intimate relationship that has gone on outside of the courthouse. And in most cases, the judge has never seen the children, has no idea about the family dynamic other than what's being told to them. And they're making, again, monumental decisions.
Are there situations, though, where, this sounds great, but are there situations where collaborative divorce wouldn't work for someone, or wouldn't be the right choice for them? And what would those be?
Well, I mean, I think that's a very fair question, and the answer is yes. Of course, there are people that are more appropriate for mediation, collaboration, arbitration, all those options that Karen started us off with. Like sometimes I think clients feel like lost in the sauce of all the options that are available to them, and there is the right fit. We never take a position that says, traditional law is wrong. I mean, traditional law is right for some people. Collaboration is right for some people. And so the key is really like, well, what's right for me and our family, and how are we going to get there? And so I would say, those are where the assessments come in, where you can use the professional lens to help a family or clients determine whether or not collaborative is the right fit for them, or mediation, or traditional. All those options that Karen addressed before. Every option is available to a particular family, and it's so fact sensitive on what's the right fit. And so we're trying to educate people to just widen their spectrum and educate them of the different options. And so will there be cases that are not appropriate for collaborative? Yes. Will it be cases not appropriate for mediation? Yes. And I think having the professionals help people, especially those who are a little bit unsure, those are the people that really kind of do best in explaining their particular family, their concerns, with the professional, getting an assessment and using that assessment to help guide them towards that next step, which would be selecting the option. That's what I would say.
Okay. We've had a few questions that have been submitted, and I was wondering if we could just take a few minutes maybe to address those questions, if they can be answered or not, and then just talk about, what are the next steps for someone if they are considering learning more about what options might be right for them if they're considering divorce. The first question is, someone says, I'm interested in collaborative divorce. It seems like it might work for me, but I don't know how to get my spouse on board or even broach the issue with them. What would you say to that?
Sure. Well, probably the first step, if only, if one individual is interested in collaborative divorce, is for that individual to have, consultation with the collaborative attorney, and so that the situation could be discussed. And then there's different ways that the spouse could be brought up to speed and informed about collaborative. Sometimes it's suggested that the couple go together to talk with a neutral divorce coach, like somebody like Shireen. Again, a very non-threatening environment, just so that the neutral divorce coach can explain the collaborative process to the couple. That I guess I would say is probably one of the more common ways to get the spouse on board. What would you say?
Another thing is, sometimes I will have a person come into my office and they'll say, oh, I talked to my spouse and they don't want to go see a coach because they're afraid that they may think of it as more of marriage counseling and not really understand what the coach does. So what I will do is I will direct them to the Collaborate New Jersey website, the collaboratenj.org. I will direct them to maybe materials. I often have in my office materials that they can give to their spouse. And I tell them, just have a conversation and say that, this is something they'd like them to consider. Maybe have them meet at a neutral location, like a Dunkin' Donuts or a Starbucks. Because then you're outside of the home, so it's a little more relaxed, it's a little more informal, and just have an open discussion and talk about, again, the different options and why they think that this option would be appropriate. If they can articulate that to their spouse, and their spouse agrees with it, then that's a good sign that they are maybe right for collaborative.
And then would their spouse then need to go and find a collaborative attorney? How would they go about finding one, and what should they look for?
Well, typically, what I would suggest is that the spouse look at the collaboratenj.org website, and there's a directory of professionals, and that contains collaboratively trained attorneys throughout the state of New Jersey. And that's what I typically recommend to a client whose spouse is looking for their own collaborative attorney.
And this here, I've just put up the screenshot of the New Jersey Council of Collaborative Practice Groups website. To the right, you'll see the various professional practice groups that are members of the New Jersey Council. You can go to collaborativenj.org and search the member professionals as well as the practice groups.
Well, that was going to be my next suggestion, Dustin, is not only can you go to the council's website, but I may also direct a party to the local practice group's website as well. For example, down here in South Jersey, we would recommend that they go to the South Jersey Collaborative Divorce Professionals website as well, is another resource because it has a list of attorneys who are more local. But if they're not sure of what practice group would be in their area, the council's website is always the first place to go and look at because it has a listing of all the professionals in New Jersey.
Do collaborative professionals, are they required to go through some sort of additional training, or can just any lawyer say that they practice collaborative law?
So this is a great question. I'll let the lawyers talk about the lawyer training, but in general, we support collaborative professionals who undergo collaborative training. And so for, financial neutrals, divorce coaches, lawyers, anybody who's sort of practicing collaborative, we hope and encourage that people take professional trainings. And I often say when I'm conducting a training to other professionals, it's not a one and done scenario. Once you do your introductory interdisciplinary training, a lot of us are really dedicated to continuing that training and getting further education. And that's one of the things I love about collaborative. It's like it's an ever evolving, growing learning experience on the professional end as well. So although there might not be sort of, required training, we certainly would say, this is a different kind of dance. And so we really do support collaboratively trained professionals. And there's plenty of trainings that go on throughout the state for professionals. And they could also sort of go to that same website and look. So if there's professionals out there listening and they're intrigued by what we have to offer, that would be another place for them to go to seek out training in collaborative and in mediation.
We have a question from Jennifer, who says, my husband wants me to write out an agreement which we both seem amicable about and present it to one lawyer, and then that lawyer said they would serve me for me to default and we can be divorced right away. Is this true?
It's not a very easy question to answer, especially in a forum like this. There's a lot more moving parts than that simple statement. So what I would recommend to Jennifer is that she go and consult with an attorney who can, discuss everything with her and go over the options and advise her correctly as to what's her next step. There is something called a kitchen table divorce where the parties sit down and they can come to a negotiated settlement on their own and they can come to a resolution, and they may not even need attorneys, or they may need attorneys to only do certain portions of the case for them. But that's something, again, that I always suggest that somebody who's looking about getting divorced at least go and consult with an attorney to make sure that all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed, and that they have the full information before they make that kind of a decision.
Okay. we're just about out of time here. We've been talking today with lost my train of thought here. Attorneys Melissa Fecak, Karen Sampson, and licensed clinical social worker and divorce coach Shireen Meistrich, all of whom are on the board of the New Jersey Council of Collaborative Practice Groups. As I said, Melissa Fecak is a family law attorney, mediator, and collaborative lawyer in Merchantville, New Jersey. Karen Sampson is a family attorney, accredited professional mediator, and collaborative lawyer in Moorestown, New Jersey. And Shireen Meistrich is a divorce coach in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. I appreciate your being on the show today and sharing your expertise. Thank you very much. This episode of New Jersey Divorce Talk Radio is brought to you by the New Jersey Council of Collaborative Practice Groups. For more information, visit collaboratenj.org.
New Jersey Divorce Talk Radio, empowering families to divorce with dignity.